Stay quiet. They have guns, Cowboy told the little girl, seconds before it was too late. The sun climbed slow over the hills that morning, painting the sky a soft pink and gold. Caleb Whitmore stood alone at the edge of his fence line, hammer in hand, sweat already gathering on the back of his neck. The air was cool now, but he knew it would not stay that way. Out here, the heat came fast and hard, same as everything else. He drove another nail into the fence post. The wood was old and splitting, like most everything on his ranch. Like him, some might say. His right shoulder ached with each swing. It always did. The bullet had gone deep that night, all those years ago, and the wound had healed wrong. Or maybe it had healed just fine, and it was the rest of him that stayed broken. He never could tell anymore. Caleb paused and pressed a hand against the old scar beneath his shirt. He did not think about the night it happened. He never let himself. But his body remembered, even when his mind refused. Some mornings when the pain woke him before the rooster did, he would lie there, staring at the ceiling, and see her face. Evelyn. Her soft brown eyes. Her laugh that used to fill the whole house. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Now the house was quiet. Too quiet. He shook the thought away and went back to work. By midday, he had fixed 3 posts and cleared a fallen branch from the water trough. His cattle grazed nearby, calm and slow, paying him no mind. That suited Caleb just fine. Cattle did not ask questions. They did not whisper behind his back the way the folks in Dry Creek did. Coward. That was the word they used. He had heard it once, spoken low outside the general store, back when he still went to town. A man who ran, a marshal who dropped his badge and hid on a lonely ranch where nobody could count on him. Let them talk. They did not know the truth. Nobody did. Caleb sat down on an old stump and drank from his canteen. The water was warm now. He looked out across the wide, empty land that was his and his alone. There was a kind of peace in being alone, he told himself. No one to protect, no one to fail. But peace and loneliness could look an awful lot alike, and lately he was having trouble telling them apart. The afternoon slipped by the way all his afternoons did. Steady, silent. He mended the last stretch of fence and led his horse back toward the barn. The sky had begun to change. Clouds gathered low in the west, dark and heavy, swallowing the last of the gold light. A storm was coming. He could smell it in the air, that sharp, wet scent that always came before the rain. That was when he noticed something wrong. Caleb stopped walking. His eyes, trained by years of tracking men across rough country, caught it right away. Hoofprints, fresh ones, pressed into the soft dirt near his fence line. They were not his. His horse had not come this way today. And these prints were deep, made by more than one rider. He knelt down and studied them. 3 horses, maybe 4. They had come from the north and circled wide around his property, keeping to the trees. His jaw tightened. He rose and followed the trail with his eyes. A few yards off, he saw broken branches on the low brush, snapped clean, the way a body pushed through in a hurry. Someone had passed through here fast, running maybe, or being chased. Caleb walked slow, careful, his old instincts waking up like something rising from a long sleep. Near the corner post, something small fluttered in the rising wind. He reached out and pulled it free. A torn piece of fabric, pale blue, soft, the kind of cloth a child's dress might be made from. It was dirty at the edges and dark in one spot that looked an awful lot like blood. His breath caught. Thunder rumbled far off, low and long. The first fat drops of rain began to fall, cool against his weathered skin. Caleb stood there holding that little scrap of cloth, staring at it as the storm rolled closer. Something was wrong. Someone was out here. And somebody, he felt deep in his bones, needed help. The storm broke hard after dark. Rain hammered the roof of Caleb's ranch house, loud as a herd of stampeding cattle. Lightning split the sky, throwing quick, sharp light across the walls before leaving the room black again. Thunder followed close behind, deep and rolling, shaking the old wood beams above his head. Caleb sat by the cold fireplace, that torn scrap of blue cloth resting on his knee. He had not lit a lamp. He did not need one. He knew this house by heart, every crack in the floor, every corner where the shadows gathered. He had memorized the darkness a long time ago. He turned the cloth over in his rough hands. Blood. He was sure of it now. Someone had passed through his land bleeding, and the thought would not leave him be. He kept telling himself it was none of his business. He had no badge, no duty, no reason to care. But his eyes kept drifting to the door. That was when he heard it. His horse. Out in the barn, the mare let out a sharp, frightened whinny, high and panicked, cutting straight through the sound of the rain. Caleb knew that sound. That was not the noise a horse made at thunder. She was used to storms. This was something else. Something had spooked her bad. Caleb was on his feet before he even decided to move. Old habits. He crossed the room and pulled his revolver down from the peg by the door where it had hung, untouched and dusty, for longer than he cared to count. The weight of it settled into his palm, like an old friend he had tried hard to forget. His thumb found the hammer without thinking. His body remembered, even when his heart wished it would not. He grabbed his coat and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit him at once, cold and heavy, soaking through in seconds. Wind tore at his coat and drove the water sideways into his face. He kept low, moving fast across the muddy yard, his boots sinking deep with every step. Lightning flashed, and for one bright moment he saw the whole ranch laid bare. The fence, the trough, the dark shape of the barn leaning against the sky. Nothing moved, no riders, no men. But the horse still cried out. Caleb reached the barn door and pressed himself flat against the wet wood. He listened. Over the drumming rain and the frightened stamp of hooves, he caught another sound. Small, faint, almost swallowed by the storm. Crying. A child. His grip tightened on the revolver. He eased the door open just enough to slip inside, keeping the weapon low but ready. The barn was dark, thick with the smell of hay and wet animal. His mare tossed her head in her stall, eyes wide and rolling, hooves kicking at the boards. "Easy, girl," Caleb murmured. "Easy now." The crying came from the far corner, near the old pile of blankets he kept for the cold months. Caleb moved toward it slow, his boots quiet on the packed dirt. Lightning flashed again through the gaps in the walls, and he saw her. A girl. She was small, maybe 10 years old, curled up tight beneath the blankets, with her knees pulled to her chest. Her feet were bare and streaked with mud. Her dress was torn, pale blue, the same color as the scrap in his pocket. Her dark hair hung wet and tangled around a face pale with cold and fear. In her hand she clutched something close to her heart. A letter, folded and crumpled, edges torn and stained dark. When she saw him, she went rigid. Her whole body shook, and it was not just from the cold. Caleb stopped. Slowly, he lowered the revolver so it pointed at the floor. He knelt down, trying to make himself smaller, less frightening. "Hey now," he said, his voice rough from lack of use. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl shrank back against the wall. Her eyes were wide and wild, darting from his face to the gun and back again. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please don't send me back." "Nobody's sending you anywhere," Caleb said. "What's your name? How'd you come to be out here?" But before she could answer, her head snapped toward the barn door. Her whole face changed. Caleb heard it too. Horses, coming fast through the storm. More than one. The girl's breath came quick and shallow, and she pressed the letter tighter against her chest. "They found me," she breathed. "They're here. Caleb's mind cleared in an instant. The fear, the grief, the years of hiding, all of it fell away. What remained was the man he used to be, the lawman, the one who could size up danger in a single heartbeat and act before the danger acted first. He moved. "Come here," he said, low and firm. "Now." The girl did not argue. Maybe it was the sound of his voice, steady where hers was shaking. She scrambled out from under the blankets and let him take her by the arm. Her fingers stayed locked around that letter, like it was the only thing holding her together. Caleb crossed the barn in 3 quick strides, pulling her along beside him. In the corner, half hidden under a heap of loose straw, sat a section of floorboards he had pried up years ago to store dry goods away from the mice. He kicked the straw aside and hooked his fingers under the edge. The board came up with a groan. Below was a shallow space, just deep enough, just big enough. "Get in," he whispered. She looked down into the dark hole, then back up at him. Her eyes were huge in her pale face. "It's all right," Caleb said. He crouched to her level. Rain dripped from his hat brim between them. "I won't let anybody touch you, but you have to trust me. Can you do that?" The horses were close now. He could hear them slowing outside, hooves splashing through the mud of his yard. The girl climbed down into the space. She curled up small, pressing the letter beneath her body, hiding it with her own shaking frame. Caleb leaned in close. "Stay quiet," he breathed. "They have guns." Then he lowered the board over her and swept the straw back across it with his boot. He straightened, slid the revolver into the back of his belt beneath his coat, and grabbed a pitchfork leaning against the stall. A man doing chores. Nothing more. He stepped out of the barn just as the riders pulled up in his yard. 4 of them. Maybe 5. Hard to say in the dark and the driving rain. They sat their horses in a loose half-circle, coats slick with water, hats pulled low. Lightning flashed and lit their faces for a moment. Cold faces. Men who had seen the wrong end of trouble too many times to flinch at a little more. One of them, broad through the shoulders, nudged his horse forward. "You, Whitmore," the man called. "That's my name," Caleb said. He kept his voice flat, tired. "What's a man want, riding on another's land this time of night?" "Looking for somebody." The rider's eyes moved past Caleb to the barn, to the dark house behind him. "A girl. Little thing, 10 years old. Run off from where she belongs. Stole something that ain't hers." "Stole what?" "Papers." The man's horse shifted under him. "Important papers. You seen her?" Caleb let his gaze drift over the group, slow and unbothered, the way an honest man with nothing to hide might. Inside, his heart beat hard against his ribs. "Seen nothing out here but rain," he said. "You're welcome to look. Won't find much." The broad man stared at him a long moment. Then he swung down from his saddle, boots hitting the mud, and jerked his head at 2 of the others. They dismounted too, drawing their weapons as they moved toward the barn and the house. Caleb stood still and let them pass. His fingers itched for the revolver at his back. He kept them loose at his sides. They tore through the barn. He heard hay scattering, boards kicked, his mare screaming in her stall. He heard boots on his porch, the crash of his door thrown open. He did not move. He stared straight ahead at the broad man, who stared right back. "You got a hard look about you, Whitmore," the man said. "Like a fella who used to be somebody." "Used to be a lot of things," Caleb said. Minutes crawled by. At last the men came back, shaking their heads, empty-handed. The broad man mounted up. He pointed a wet finger at Caleb. "That girl turns up. You send word to the Red River men. There's coin in it. And trouble for those who hide her." Then they wheeled their horses and rode off into the storm. Caleb stood in the pouring rain long after the hoofbeats faded. They had not come for a runaway. They had come hunting a child. Caleb waited. Even after the storm swallowed the last of the hoofbeats, he stood there in the rain, counting his own breaths. 10. 20. Making sure they were gone. Making sure this was not some trick, some rider circling back to catch him off guard. Only when he was certain did he go back inside the barn. He swept the straw aside with his boot and lifted the board. The girl was still curled in the dark, small as a rabbit, both arms wrapped tight around the letter. When the light hit her face, she flinched. "They're gone," Caleb said softly. "It's just me." He held out his hand. She stared at it a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached up and let him lift her out of the hole. She weighed almost nothing, skin and bone and fear. "Come on inside," he said. "You're froze half through." The house was quiet and cold. Caleb built up the fire, feeding it kindling until the flames caught and threw a warm glow across the room. The men had left their mark. His table shoved sideways, a chair tipped over, a drawer yanked out and dumped on the floor. He set it all right without a word. The girl stood by the door, dripping, watching every move he made. He found some of Evelyn's old things folded away in a chest he had not opened in years. A soft flannel shirt. It swallowed the girl whole, but it was dry. He turned his back while she changed, then handed her a wool blanket, the gray one with the blue stitching along the edge. Evelyn's blanket. He held it out and, for a second, could not let go of it. The girl looked up at him. He made his fingers open. "Here," he said. "Wrap up." She pulled it around her shoulders and sank down close to the fire. Caleb ladled beans and cornbread onto a tin plate and set it in her lap. She ate like she had not eaten in days. Maybe she hadn't. He waited until the plate was clean, until some color had come back to her cheeks. Then he pulled a chair over and sat across from her, elbows on his knees. "You feeling better?" he asked. She nodded. "Good." He kept his voice easy, gentle, the way he might gentle a spooked horse. "Now, I need you to tell me something, and I need the truth. Those men out there. Why are they after you?" The girl's hands tightened on the blanket. She looked at the fire, not at him. "They killed my pa," she whispered. Caleb went very still. "Go on," he said. "His name was Thomas Bell." Her voice shook, but she pushed the words out. "We got a ranch, out past the ridge, 2 days' ride. Everybody knows my pa. He helps folks. When the Carters lost their crop, he gave them cattle and never asked for nothing back. He says land don't belong to the richest man. It belongs to the people who love it." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "There were men who wanted our land. The Red River men. They come again and again, waving money, saying sell or you'll be sorry. Pa always told them no." Her chin trembled. "3 days ago they come at night. I hid in the loft. I saw them shoot him. I saw it." Caleb closed his eyes, opened them. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm real sorry." Clara did not seem to hear him. The words were pouring out now, like a dam broke. "Before he died, my pa gave me this." She pulled the letter out from beneath the blanket. It was torn along one edge, stained dark. He said if anything happened to him, I was to take it to the county courthouse and give it to a judge. Nobody else. He said it's got names in it. Names of the men who paid to hurt folks. Proof, he said. Proof they done it. She held it against her chest. "I'm Clara," she said. "Clara Bell. And I've been running ever since." Caleb stared at the torn letter in the little girl's hands. He knew now. This was no lost child. This was a fight for justice. Caleb woke before the sun. He always did, years of it. His body knew the hour without a clock, knew the exact shade of gray that came just before dawn. He lay on his cot in the corner and stared at the ceiling beams, listening. There was a sound in his house he had not heard in a long time. Soft breathing, the gentle in and out of someone sleeping. He turned his head. Clara lay curled on the floor by the fireplace, wrapped in Evelyn's gray blanket. The fire had burned down to red coals, but the room still held its warmth. Her dark hair spilled across the folded shirt she had used for a pillow. Her face, so pinched and scared the night before, had gone smooth, peaceful. One small hand rested near her cheek. The other still held the torn letter, even in sleep. Caleb did not move for a long while. He just watched her breathe. Something turned over inside his chest. Something old and buried and aching. He had forgotten what it felt like to wake up and not be alone, to have another heart beating under the same roof. The house had been a tomb for so long, quiet as a grave. Now there was a child by his fire, and the sight of her filled the empty room in a way he could not explain. He thought of Evelyn. She would have loved this girl. Evelyn had always wanted little ones running through the house. She used to say it, standing at the window with the morning light on her face. Someday, Caleb. Someday this place will be full of noise. He had promised her that. He had promised her a lot of things. Then, one night on a dark road, he had failed to keep any of them. Caleb rose slow, careful not to make the floorboards creak. He crossed to the window and looked out. The storm had passed. The world outside lay washed and clean, the fields silver with rain, the mountains sharp against a pale sky. A meadowlark sang somewhere out by the fence line. Behind him, Clara stirred. She murmured something in her sleep. A name, maybe. Pa. Then she settled again. Caleb's jaw tightened. He knew what he had to do. He could not keep her here. The Red River men would come back. Men like that always came back. They would search every ranch, every barn, every hole in the ground, until they found what they were hunting. And when they found it, they would not leave a witness. Not even a 10-year-old girl. The only safe place for Clara was the county courthouse. 2 days' ride, maybe 3 if they went careful and kept off the main roads. She had to put that letter in a judge's hand, nobody else. That was what her pa had told her, and Thomas Bell had been a wise man. Caleb built the fire back up and set the coffee pot on. Then he went to the far corner of the room, to the trunk he never opened. He knelt in front of it. His hands rested on the lid a moment before he lifted it. Inside lay the pieces of the man he used to be. A folded coat, a pair of worn leather gloves, and there, wrapped in an oiled cloth, the shape he had not touched in years. He drew it out and unwrapped it slow. His marshal's revolver. The metal was dull with age, but it was solid, heavy, familiar as his own hand. He turned it over in the firelight, and for a moment he was that other man again. The one folks had trusted, the one who wore a badge and rode toward trouble instead of away from it. He found the cleaning rag and the oil. He worked in silence, taking the gun apart, piece by piece, wiping each part clean, checking the action. His fingers remembered every motion. They had never forgotten. You couldn't save your wife. A voice whispered in the back of his mind. Silas's voice, though Silas was not there. What makes you think you can save this child? Caleb's hands paused. He looked over at Clara, still sleeping, still holding her father's last gift against her chest. He did not believe he deserved another chance. He was not sure a man like him ever could. But deserving had nothing to do with it now. He slid the last piece into place and set the revolver down beside him. All right, he said quietly. All right then. They rode out under a wide morning sky. Caleb kept the horse to a steady walk at first, letting the mare find her footing on the wet ground. Clara sat in front of him, small and quiet, her hands wrapped tight around the saddle horn. The torn letter was tucked safe inside her shirt now, close to her heart. Caleb had made her a proper pair of shoes from an old pair of Evelyn's, stuffed with cloth to fit her small feet. They were too big, but they would do. The ranch shrank behind them. The empty house, the mended fences, the chair by the window that nobody sat in anymore. Caleb did not look back. They stayed off the main road, cutting through the low hills where the grass grew tall and the pines threw long shadows. It was slower going, but slower was safer. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Then Clara said soft, "My pa had a horse like this, a gray one. He called her Biscuit." Caleb almost smiled. Biscuit's a fine name for a horse. He said she reminded him of one. Clara went quiet a moment. He named everything, the chickens, the cows, even the old plow. He called it Betsy. Sounds like your pa liked to laugh. He did. Her voice grew smaller. He was always laughing, even when things were hard. Especially when things were hard, Ma used to say. Caleb let the horse pick her way down a slope. Tell me about him. Clara was quiet, gathering her thoughts the way children do when a memory matters. Then it came out of her like water, finding a crack. He helped everybody, she said. There was a family down the creek from us, the Hendersons. Their crops failed 2 summers back, and they had no money for seed. Pa gave them some of ours, didn't ask for a thing. When Mr. Henderson tried to pay him later, Pa just shook his head. He said a man who lets his neighbor go hungry can't call himself a man at all. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. There was a widow, too, Clara went on. Miss Coleman. Her roof caved in one winter. Pa rode out in the snow and fixed it himself. Took him 3 days. He came home with his fingers all blue, and Ma scolded him, something awful. But he just grinned and said, "Helping folks keeps a body warm on the inside." He sounds like a good man, Caleb said, and he meant it more than he could say. He was the best man. Clara's voice trembled. That's why they killed him. Caleb said nothing. He only tightened his arm a little around her, steadying her against him. The rich men wanted our land, she said. The Red River men. They kept coming, offering money. Pa kept saying no. They got angry. They said everybody sells sooner or later. And Pa, he stood right up on the porch and told them. She drew a shaky breath. He said, "Land don't belong to the richest man. It belongs to the people who love it." He said we'd built that place with our own hands and we'd die on it before we'd hand it over. The wind moved through the grass. Somewhere a hawk cried high overhead. He shouldn't have said that last part, Clara whispered. About dying. Caleb closed his eyes for just a second. When he opened them, the world was blurred at the edges. He was brave, he said quietly. Braver than most men ever get to be. They rode on. The sun crossed the sky and began to fall. Shadows stretched long and blue across the hills. By evening they came upon an old church, standing alone at the edge of a dead field. Its white paint had peeled away to gray boards. The steeple leaned. The windows were empty holes where the glass had gone. But the wall stood, and the roof held, and that was enough. Caleb reined the mare to a stop. "We'll rest here tonight," he said. "Get you some sleep." He helped Clara down and led the horse around back, out of sight of the road. He worked quick and quiet, loosening the saddle, checking the girth. Clara stood hugging herself in the cooling air. That was when Caleb saw it. He had crouched to check the ground near an old watering trough, meaning to see if the well still ran. But his eyes caught something in the soft dirt beside it. Hoofprints. Fresh ones. Caleb went still. He pressed 2 fingers into the edge of one print. The dirt was damp, the shape sharp and clean. These horses had passed through no more than a few hours ago. 4 of them. Maybe 5. Riding hard, from the depth of the tracks. Riding the same direction he and Clara had come. His blood ran cold. He knew those tracks. He had seen them cut across his own yard 2 nights past, when the Red River men had come pounding on his door in the storm. They had not given up. They were still hunting, and they were close. They came within sight of Dry Creek 2 days later, tired and hungry, keeping to the tree line above the town. Caleb reined the mare to a stop behind a cluster of pines. Below them, the town lay quiet in the late morning light. Too quiet. Smoke curled from a few chimneys. A wagon sat empty outside the general store, but the streets were near empty, and something about that stillness made the hair on Caleb's neck stand up. He studied the town, the way he used to study a room before walking into trouble, slow, careful, reading every shadow. Then he saw them. 2 men on horseback sat outside the town hall, rifles resting across their saddles. Another leaned against the post, outside the saloon, watching the road. A fourth stood near the church, hat pulled low, doing nothing at all except watching. They were not townsfolk. Townsfolk had somewhere to be. These men were waiting. "Stay low," Caleb whispered. Clara shrank against him, her small hands gripping his sleeve. "They're watching for us," she said. It was not a question. "They're watching for you." Caleb kept his voice even, though his heart hammered. "Which means they know you're headed here. They figure sooner or later we'll ride in through the front." "So what do we do?" Caleb was quiet a long moment. He looked past the town, toward the road that led east to the county courthouse. That was where the letter needed to go. But the road ran straight through Dry Creek, and Dry Creek was a trap with its jaws open. "We don't go in," he said. "Not yet. Not like this." He backed the mare into the trees, out of sight, and swung down. He lifted Clara after him, setting her feet gentle on the ground. Then he crouched, drawing a rough map in the dirt with a stick. "There's a creek runs behind the church," he murmured. "Cuts north, then east. It's slow. It's cold. But it keeps us off every road they're watching." He looked at her. "It'll take us past town without ever setting foot in it." Clara nodded, brave as she could be, but her lip trembled. "I know Martha," Caleb said, softer now. "The schoolteacher. She lives on the north edge, away from all this. If anybody in that town will help us, it's her. We slip in the back way. We get to Martha. We figure the rest from there. You trust her?" Caleb thought about that. Trust had been a hard word for him for a long time. "I did once," he said. "That'll have to be enough." They led the mare down through the trees on foot, Caleb keeping Clara close, his hand never far from the girl's shoulder. The creek was where he remembered it, running low and brown behind the ruined edge of town. They followed it slow, boots sinking in the mud, the cold water numbing Caleb's ankles. For a while, it worked. The rooftops of Dry Creek passed by on their right, close enough to see, and far enough to stay hidden. Caleb's shoulders began, just barely, to ease. Then a voice cut through the quiet, not near them, far off, back the way they had come, back toward his ranch. Caleb froze. He turned his head and listened. Faint, carried on the wind, the sound of horses, men laughing. And beneath it, a voice he had not heard in 5 long years, but would have known in his sleep. His whole body went cold in a way the creek water never could. He had left something behind at the ranch. A trail. A scent. Fool that he was, he'd hoped they'd lose it. Miles back, at the empty ranch he'd walked away from, Silas Crow stepped down from his horse and looked at the dead grass, where a little girl's footprints had dried in the mud. He smiled. He crouched, touched the small print, and stood again. "She was here," Silas said to his men. "The old marshal's got her. Well now." He looked toward the hills, toward the distant creek, and his smile widened, like a man greeting an old friend. "Isn't that something? After all these years, Caleb Whitmore's got somebody to protect again." He wiped his hands on his coat. "Let's go remind him how that ends." The morning came gray and slow. Caleb had not slept. He sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, watching the road until the first light crept over the hills. Somewhere in the night the sound of Silas and his men had faded, then circled, then faded again. They were near, close enough to smell. He looked back at the corner of the room where Clara slept beneath Evelyn's old quilt, her small chest rising and falling. So peaceful, so trusting. It made his chest ache in a way he had not let himself feel in years. Then he heard hooves. Caleb was on his feet before he knew it. He crossed the room in 3 steps and shook Clara gently awake. "Clara, get up. Quiet now." She woke fast, eyes wide, already reaching for the letter tucked against her chest. That was the thing about this child. She never had to be told twice. "Under the floor," Caleb whispered, lifting the loose boards in the back room. "Same as the barn. You don't make a sound. No matter what you hear. You understand me?" Her eyes searched his face. Then she nodded and slipped down into the dark. He set the boards back and pulled a rug over them just as the knock came. 3 heavy raps. Caleb opened the door with his rifle low but ready. Silas Crow stood on the porch, hat in his hands, smiling like they were old friends meeting at church. "Morning, Caleb," he said. "Long time." "Silas." Caleb's voice was flat as stone. "You lost? Now that's cold." Silas clicked his tongue. He looked past Caleb into the house, slow, taking it in. "Just doing a bit of neighborly asking. There's a girl gone missing. Thief, they say. Stole something don't belong to her." He met Caleb's eyes. "You seen anybody out this way?" "Nobody comes out this way," Caleb said. "That's why I live here." Silas laughed softly. But his eyes were flat and hard, the way they'd always been underneath the charm. Caleb had just never let himself see it, not until it was too late. And standing there, staring into the face of the man who had once called him brother, Caleb felt the memory rise up like floodwater. The night the robbery went bad, the bank, the shots in the dark, Evelyn's voice calling his name, and the split second, the terrible half-second, when he had hesitated, when something in him had frozen. Because he had seen Silas across the street, his deputy, his partner, standing calm among the robbers, not fighting them, standing with them. That was the moment he lost. That was the second that cost him everything. By the time he'd understood, Evelyn was already falling. "You always did keep to yourself," Silas said now, snapping him back. His smile never moved. "Well, if she turns up, you send word. Wouldn't want the wrong man protecting the wrong little thief." He put his hat back on. He turned to go. Then he paused. "You look tired, Caleb," he said, almost gentle. "Some men just can't help who they lose." And he rode off with his men, leaving those words hanging in the cold morning air like smoke. Caleb stood in the doorway a long time. His hands were shaking. When he finally pulled the floorboards up, Clara climbed out and looked at his face. She saw everything on it. She always did. "That was him," she said quietly. "The man who's after me." Caleb sank down into a chair. For a moment he could not speak. Then, because she deserved the truth, he gave it to her. "He used to be my deputy," Caleb said. "My closest friend. I trusted him with my life." His voice cracked. "The night my wife died, he was working with the men who killed her. I froze when I saw him. Just 1 second. That 1 second was all it took." He stared at his own hands. "I've spent 5 years knowing everyone I try to protect ends up dead. Because I failed her. Because I wasn't enough." Clara stepped close. She put her small hand on his arm. "But I'm not dead," she said softly. "You've kept me safe this whole time." Her eyes were steady and sure. "1 bad second doesn't make your whole life bad, Marshal Caleb. My pa said everybody falls down. What matters is you get back up." Caleb looked at her, and for the first time in 5 years, something inside him began, very slowly, to believe her. They left before the sun climbed too high. Caleb saddled his old bay mare and set Clara in front of him, the letter buttoned safe inside her coat. He carried his rifle across the saddle and a smaller pistol at his hip. The road to Bell Ranch was long, near half a day's ride through open country, where a man could be seen for miles. That worried him, but there was no other way. The missing page of that letter was the only thing that could put Silas Crow behind iron bars, and it was waiting somewhere in the place where Clara's father had lived and died. For a long while, they rode in silence. The prairie rolled out golden and quiet around them, broken only by the sound of the mare's hooves and the wind bending the tall grass. Clara sat still against him, watching the hills the way a rabbit watches for a hawk. "Your pa," Caleb said at last, keeping his voice easy. "You said men came to see him." "Before." Clara was quiet a moment. Then she nodded. "They started coming near a year back," she said. "Fine clothes, fine horses. They'd smile and say Pa's land was worth good money, more than any small rancher could ever hope for." She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. Pa always said no, real polite the first few times. Said the land wasn't his to sell. Said it belonged to the folks who worked it and lived on it, neighbors and such. And they didn't like that. "No, sir." Her voice dropped. The smiles stopped. The last man who came didn't smile at all. He told Pa a man could have accidents out here, fires, cattle that get sick, wells that go bad. She swallowed. That night Pa sat up late writing that letter. He kept a pistol on the table. I'd never seen him do that before. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. He knew the shape of it now. He had seen it 100 times as a marshal. Powerful men who wanted something and would burn down the world to take it, then call it business. 3 days later they came at night, Clara whispered. I heard the shots. Pa yelled for me to run, so I ran. A tear slipped down her cheek, but her voice stayed steady. He put that letter in my hand and pushed me out the back. Told me to find someone honest, someone who wouldn't be bought. Caleb looked down at the top of her head. This small, brave child had carried that weight alone for days. He raised a strong girl, Caleb said quietly. Clara wiped her face with the back of her hand. He'd have liked you, she said. I think he would have. Something warm and painful moved through Caleb's chest. He said nothing. He just held the reins a little tighter and rode on. The sun was low and orange when Bell Ranch finally rose up out of the land. Caleb reined the mare to a stop at the top of a rise and looked down at it. His stomach dropped. The place was torn apart. The front door of the house hung crooked on one hinge, swaying in the wind. Windows were smashed. The barn doors stood wide open, and the yard was a mess of scattered tools and broken furniture dragged out into the dirt. Every shed had been thrown open. The very ground looked churned, as if men had dug through it with anger and greed. Clara made a small sound in her throat. Caleb felt her go stiff against him. They've been here, she breathed. Stay close, Caleb said. He walked the mare down slow, eyes moving over every shadow, every dark window. But the ranch was empty. Silas's men were long gone. They had come and taken the place apart, looking for what Clara carried and for whatever else her father might have hidden. Caleb slid down from the saddle and helped Clara to the ground. He turned in a slow circle, taking it all in, and the truth settled cold and hard in his chest. They had searched everything, every drawer, every board, every barrel. If the missing page was still here, Silas's men would be back to burn it all to ash the moment they realized they had missed it. Caleb knelt down and looked Clara in the eye. We have to find it first, he said, before they come back, before they destroy every last piece of it. Clara led the way inside, stepping careful over the broken door. The house smelled of dust and cold ash. Inside, it was worse than the yard. Chairs lay tipped on their sides. A cabinet had been pulled from the wall and dumped out, its dishes shattered across the floorboards. Papers lay scattered everywhere, torn and trampled, some of them boot-printed and gray with dirt. Clara stood very still in the middle of it all. Her eyes moved slow around the room, taking in the ruin of the only home she had ever known. That was Pa's chair, she said softly. pointing to a heavy wooden rocker knocked on its back. He'd sit there at night. Read to me sometimes. Caleb crossed the room and set the chair upright, gentle, like it mattered. Then, it stays standing, he said. Clara gave him a small, grateful look. Caleb turned to the work. We look everywhere, he said. Every drawer, every crack. Men like these tear a place apart in a hurry. They break things open. But a smart man hides things where a hurried search never thinks to look. They began. Caleb went to the big desk in the corner, or what was left of it. Every drawer had been yanked out and flung aside. He got down on his knees and ran his hands along the underside of the desk, feeling for anything tucked away, any false bottom or hidden slot. Nothing but rough wood and splinters. Clara searched too. She moved through the house like she knew its bones, checking places only a daughter would know. Behind the loose brick by the stove where her father kept spare coins. Under the floorboard, near the window that always creaked. Inside the hollow leg of the kitchen table. He used to hide my birthday presents here, she said, pulling at the table leg. But it was empty. Caleb searched the bedroom next. The mattress had been slashed open, straw pulled out and thrown across the floor. He checked the walls, tapping along them, listening for anything hollow. He lifted a fallen picture frame and found the photograph inside cracked but whole. A man with kind eyes and a strong jaw stood beside a small girl. That's him, Clara said quietly from the doorway. That's Pa. Caleb looked at the face a long moment. Thomas Bell, the kind of man he had once wanted to be. He's got your eyes, Caleb said. Clara came and took the frame in both hands, holding it close. They kept looking. The sun sank lower, and the light through the broken windows turned deep gold, then gray. Caleb lit a lantern he found hanging by the door and set it on the mended chair. The search grew slow. Every place they checked had already been torn open by other hands. His hope thinned with each empty drawer. Then Clara went still. She was standing by the fireplace, staring at a stone in the hearth. It sat a little apart from the others, its edge darker, cleaner, as if it had been moved and moved again over the years. Pa always kept his most important things where the fire couldn't reach, she said slowly. He told me once. He said fire takes everything, so you keep the things that matter in the cold stone, not the wood. Caleb crossed the room fast and knelt beside her. The stone was loose. He worked his fingers into the seam and pulled. It came free with a soft grind, and behind it was a small hollow, dug into the cold stone of the hearth. His heart lifted. Clara leaned in, breath held. Inside the hollow sat a folded oilcloth, tied with string to keep out damp. Caleb pulled it out and set it on the floor between them. His hands worked the knot loose. Clara watched with wide eyes. He unfolded the cloth. There was a note, in the same steady hand as the letter Clara carried, and beneath it, an empty space where a page had clearly rested. The oilcloth held the shape of it, a faint, clean rectangle in the dust. But the page was gone. Caleb picked up the note and read it by the lantern light. If you found this, then you found the rest of my words. The last page holds the name and the mark that damns them all. I have kept it apart, so no single find can undo what I built. Justice belongs to the person brave enough to carry it. Caleb read it twice. Then he lowered it slow. He split it. Caleb said quietly, kept the last page separate, somewhere else. He looked at the empty space in the cloth, and the cold truth settled hard in his gut. Clara, this is the piece we needed, the signature, the proof that hangs Silas himself. Clara's eyes filled. But it's gone. It's gone, Caleb said. He stared at the empty hollow, and his jaw tightened. Without that page, everything we have is just words. Not enough. Not enough to touch a man like Crow. The ride into Dry Creek felt longer than any Caleb had made before. Clara sat behind him on the horse, her small arms wrapped around his middle. The town rose up ahead in the late morning light, its wood buildings gray and weathered, its main street quiet under a wide and empty sky. Caleb had not ridden down this street in years. He had told himself he never would again. But the empty hollow in the hearth had changed things. The last page was gone, taken by Silas or hidden by Thomas somewhere still unknown. Caleb could not fight the syndicate alone. He knew that now. A man could carry only so much on one wounded shoulder. He needed help. He slowed the horse near the general store, where a handful of men stood talking. They fell quiet as he approached. Eyes turned. Some narrowed. Caleb felt the weight of every look land on him like stones. He climbed down and helped Clara to the ground. Then he stood tall, though it cost him. "I need to speak to you," he said. His voice came out rough from disuse. "All of you." A man in a stained apron crossed his arms. Caleb knew him. Harlan, who ran the store. "Well now," Harlan said, "if it ain't the marshal who ran off and left us." "I'm not a marshal anymore," Caleb said. "No," Harlan agreed. "You surely ain't." More folks gathered now, drawn by the sound of trouble. A woman pulled her child closer. 2 ranch hands leaned against the rail, watching with hard faces. Caleb saw the old rumors written plain across every one of them. The coward, the man who quit, the man who could not be trusted when it counted. "This is Clara Bell," Caleb said, resting a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Thomas Bell's daughter. Some of you knew her father, knew what kind of man he was." A murmur ran through the crowd. A few heads nodded slow. "Thomas Bell was murdered," Caleb went on, "by the Red River Cattle Syndicate, by Silas Crow, and these men are hunting this child because she carries proof of what they did." He looked from face to face. "I'm asking for your help, to stand up, to testify, to end this." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Harlan laughed, short and bitter. "You want us to go up against Crow, a man with guns and money and half the county in his pocket?" He shook his head. "And you're the one asking. The man who left his own badge in the dirt the second things got hard." "That ain't the whole of it," Caleb said quietly. "It's enough of it," said one of the ranch hands. "We remember, Whitmore. You disappeared, left us to fend for ourselves." Clara's hand found Caleb's. He felt her fingers tremble. "Please," she said, her voice small but clear. "He's a good man. He saved me." But the crowd was already turning away, shaking heads, muttering low. The wall of them closed like a door. Then a voice cut through, steady and strong. "Stop!" Everyone looked. Martha Ellis stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, her gray shawl pulled tight, her chin high. She had taught half these people their letters when they were children. When she spoke, they listened. "You want to talk about what you remember," Martha said, her eyes sweeping the crowd. "Then remember it true. I knew Caleb Whitmore before the grief took him. I knew Evelyn." The name landed soft, and the muttering died. "He didn't leave because he was afraid," Martha went on. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. "His wife was killed right in front of him. Shot down during a robbery he couldn't stop. And this man blamed himself every single day since. He didn't run from cowardice. He ran because he couldn't bear that he lived, and she didn't." She turned slow, looking each of them in the eye. "A good man who is hurting is still a good man," she said. "And a hurting man who comes back to ask for help, when he's got every reason to hide, that takes more courage than any of you have shown." Silence. Then Harlan looked down at his boots. "What do you need us to do?" he asked. And one by one, others stepped forward. The days that followed changed something in Dry Creek. It started small. Harlan cleared a space in the back of the general store, pushing aside barrels and sacks of flour to make room for a long wooden table. That table became the heart of it all. Each morning, people came. They came quiet at first, glancing over their shoulders as though Silas Crow himself might be watching from the shadows. But they came. Caleb sat at the head of the table, with a stub of pencil and sheets of paper Martha had brought from the schoolhouse. He listened. That was the thing he had forgotten how to do. To sit still and let another person speak while their pain poured out. An old rancher named Pell was the first. His hands shook as he twisted his hat in his lap. "They came in the night," Pell said. "3 of them. Told me the syndicate was buying up the valley. Said it'd be a shame if my barn caught fire with my horses inside." He swallowed hard. "I signed the paper the next morning. Sold my land for near nothing. Been ashamed of it ever since." Caleb wrote it down. Every word. "You've got nothing to be ashamed of," he said. "A man protecting his family isn't weak. Now you're standing up. That counts." Pell nodded, and his eyes went wet. More followed. A widow named Ruth told how the syndicate men had trampled her garden and shot her milk cow when her husband refused to sell. A young ranch hand named Toby described watching Crow's men drive off another family's cattle in broad daylight, while the sheriff looked the other way. Clara sat beside Caleb through it all. She kept the papers in order, her small fingers careful, her face serious. Now and then she would look up at Caleb, and he would give her the smallest nod. "You're doing fine," that nod said. "Your father would be proud." Martha moved among them like a shepherd tending a flock. She brought coffee. She held hands. When someone broke down, she was there with a soft word and a steady arm. "You see it now," she said quietly to Caleb one evening, after the store had emptied. "How much they've suffered. All this time, alone, afraid." "I should have been here," Caleb said. "You're here now." By the 3rd day, the pile of papers had grown thick. Names, dates, threats, land sold under fear. It was a picture, slowly taking shape, of everything the Red River Cattle Syndicate had done. But it was not enough. Caleb knew it. Words on paper could be argued away by clever lawyers and paid judges. They needed the records, the real ones. The syndicate's own accounts, showing the payments and the crimes in black and white. They needed proof no man could deny. It was Toby, the young ranch hand, who gave them the first thread. "There's a place," he said one afternoon, leaning close over the table. "Up in the hills, north of Bell Ranch. Old mining camp. Been empty, going on 10 years now. Only nobody told the syndicate that." He wet his lips. "I've seen their wagons head up that road at night. Loaded heavy going up, empty coming back. Never made sense to me. There's no silver left in those hills." Caleb leaned forward. "You're sure?" "Sure as I'm sitting here. Twice I saw it. Both times riders came back before dawn." Ruth spoke up then. "My husband said the same before he passed. Said Crow used that camp for something. Wouldn't say what. Said it was better not to know." The pieces slid together in Caleb's mind, the way they used to when he wore the badge. A hidden place. Wagons in the night. A man like Silas Crow would never keep his secrets close to home. He would bury them somewhere forgotten, somewhere no honest soul would think to look. "That's where he keeps them," Caleb said. "The records, the ledgers, everything." Martha met his eyes across the table. "Then, that's where we have to go." Caleb stood. His shoulder ached, the old wound pulling tight, but he hardly felt it. For the first time in years, he knew exactly what he had to do. "No," he said. "That's where I have to go." They rode out before first light. Caleb had said he would go alone. But some things a man cannot decide by himself. When he stepped out into the gray dawn, they were already waiting. Toby sat tall on a borrowed horse. Pell was there too, his old rifle across his saddle, and Clara, wrapped in Evelyn's blanket, her chin set in a way Caleb had come to know. "You're not leaving me behind," she said. It was not a question. He looked at her a long moment. Then he nodded. Some fights, folks had to face together. The trail north wound through broken country. Red rock, twisted pine. The kind of land that swallowed sound and hit a man well, if he knew how to move quiet. Caleb led them off the main road, keeping to the low washes where the dust would not rise and give them away. Twice they saw riders. The first time, Caleb raised his hand, and everyone froze. Down in a dry gully, they pressed against the rocks while two of Crow's men trotted by along the ridge above. Clara held her breath. Caleb rested one hand on her shoulder, steady as stone. The riders passed. Nobody moved until the hoofbeats faded. "Stay close," Caleb whispered. "Stay low." They went on. By midday, the old mining camp rose up out of the hills. It was a sorry sight. A cluster of gray buildings, half fallen, their boards silvered by years of sun and wind. A rusted ore cart lay on its side. The mouth of the mine gaped dark in the hillside like a wound that never healed. Caleb studied it a long while from cover. No smoke, no horses, no sign of men. "Toby, you and Pell keep watch," he said. "One at each end. Anything moves on that road, you whistle. Too long, too short. Then you ride. Don't wait on us." The young man swallowed and nodded. Caleb took Clara's hand, and they crossed the open ground quick and quiet. Inside the first building, dust hung thick in slanted light. There was nothing but rot and cobwebs and the bones of old furniture. The second was the same. Caleb worked methodical, the way he'd been trained long ago. He checked floorboards, tapped walls, looked behind every empty shelf and under every broken bench. Nothing. His jaw tightened. Toby had seen wagons. The proof was here. It had to be. The third building had been the assay office once. A heavy safe stood in the corner, its door hanging open and empty. Caleb's heart sank. Emptied out. Long gone, maybe. Carried off to somewhere they'd never find. "They moved it," he said half to himself. "We're too late." But Clara wasn't listening. She had wandered to the back of the room, to a stone fireplace, black with old soot. She was staring at it, her head tilted, the way her father used to look at a thing when he was working it out. "Caleb," she said softly. "Come here." He went. "Look." She pointed. One of the hearthstones sat crooked. The mortar around it was not old and crumbling like the rest. It was fresh, newer. Someone had pried this stone loose and set it back, not so long ago. Caleb knelt. His fingers found the edge. He worked the stone free and set it aside. Beneath it lay a hollow. And in that hollow sat a small tin box, the kind a man might keep letters or coins in. Clara's hands trembled as she reached for it. She lifted it out and set it on the dusty floor between them. The lid was tight with rust. Caleb pried it with his knife until it gave with a groan. Inside lay papers, folded, yellowed at the edges. Clara drew out the top one with careful fingers. Her breath caught. "It's Papa's writing," she whispered. Caleb leaned close. And there it was. The missing page. Thomas Bell's own hand, listing every crime, every name, every payment. And at the bottom, in ink gone brown with age, a signature that made Caleb's blood run cold. Silas Crow, approving the murder, ordering it done. Plain as day. Clara looked up, tears shining in her eyes. "We found it," she said. "We really found it." They rode back into Dry Creek as the sun was setting, painting the sky the color of ripe peaches. Word traveled faster than their horses. By the time they reached the main street, folks had spilled out of their homes and shops. They lined the wooden walkways. They gathered in the dusty road. Somebody had gone and told everyone what Caleb Whitmore carried in his saddlebag. The proof. The real proof. Enough to bring down Silas Crow. Caleb had expected quiet. Maybe a few careful nods. What he got instead near stole his breath. A cheer went up. It started small, from old Pell's brother by the blacksmith shop. Then it spread. Men took off their hats and waved them. Women pressed their hands to their hearts. Children ran alongside the horses, whooping and laughing like it was the 4th of July. "That's him," someone said. "That's the marshal." Caleb winced at the word, but nobody seemed to notice. Martha Ellis stood on the steps of the schoolhouse, her gray hair catching the last of the light. When she saw Clara safe in the saddle in front of Caleb, her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes went shiny. She hurried down the steps as fast as her old legs would carry her. "Praise be," she whispered. "Praise be, you're home, both of you." Caleb lowered Clara down into Martha's waiting arms. The old woman held the girl tight, rocking her gentle, whispering things only the two of them could hear. The townsfolk crowded close. Hands reached up to clap Caleb on the leg, on the boot, anywhere they could reach. Faces he had not seen in years. Faces that once whispered he was a coward now looked up at him with something he had almost forgotten. Hope. "We stand with you," a rancher called out. "Every one of us. Let that snake try and wriggle out of this." "To the courthouse," another shouted. "First thing. We'll all go. Let them hear us." Caleb slid down from his horse. His boots hit the dirt, and folks pressed in around him, talking all at once, their voices bright and eager. For a moment, standing there in the middle of that crowd, he let himself feel it. The warmth of people who cared. The rare, sweet taste of not being alone. But the feeling did not last, because underneath the cheering, underneath the hope, something dark stirred in Caleb's chest. Something that had been sleeping a long time and was awake now, hungry. He saw Silas Crow's signature every time he closed his eyes. That brown ink, that careless scrawl. A man ordering murder the way another man might order supper. And behind that, older still, he saw Evelyn. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the lamps were lit, Caleb slipped away to the edge of town. He stood by the fence at the far end of the churchyard, staring out at the dark hills where the mining camp waited. Martha found him there. She always did seem to know where a hurting soul would go. "You should be resting," she said softly, coming to stand beside him. "Can't rest." His voice came out rough, not with him still out there, still breathing. Martha said nothing. She just waited, the way good folks do. "I keep thinking about it," Caleb went on. His hands gripped the fence rail until his knuckles went white. "About Evelyn, about the night she died. He set that in motion, Martha. Everything I lost, he took from me." His jaw trembled. "When I face him, I don't want to arrest him. God help me, I want to make him pay. I want him gone from this earth for what he did to her." There. He had said it. The ugly truth he had carried like a stone in his heart. Martha was quiet a long moment. Then she laid her worn hand over his. "I know that pain, Caleb. I do." Her voice was gentle but firm. "But revenge won't bring her back. It never brings anybody back. It only hollows a man out until there's nothing left of him but the hate." She squeezed his hand. "You kill him in anger, and you don't win. You lose the last good part of yourself. And that's the part Evelyn loved most." Caleb closed his eyes. The wind moved through the churchyard, soft and cool. And slowly, the fist around his heart began to loosen. "Justice," he said at last, the word breaking free like a stone rolled from a grave. "Not revenge. Justice." Martha smiled, tears in her eyes. "That's the man I always knew you were." The next morning came bright and clear. Caleb rose before the sun, the way he always had in his martial days. His mind was sharp now, focused. He had a plan. He gathered the men who mattered most in Martha's kitchen. Old Pell's brother, 2 ranch hands who had worked for Thomas Bell, a farmer named Hughes, who knew every back road in the county. They crowded around the table while Martha poured coffee that could wake the dead. "The county judge sits in Carson City," Caleb said. He spread a worn map across the table. His finger traced a line through the hills. 3 days' ride, if we go the main road. But the main road is where Silas will be watching. So we don't take the main road, Hughes said. No. Caleb tapped a thin trail that wound through the foothills. We take the old mining path. Harder going, slower, but Silas won't expect it. He straightened up and looked at each man in turn. Here's the thing. Silas is smart. He'll figure I'm carrying the evidence myself. So that's what we let him think. Caleb pulled the folded pages from his coat. I'll ride out the main road, loud as a brass band. Draw his men after me. Meanwhile, Hughes carries the real proof up the mining path. The room went quiet. You'd make yourself the bait, Martha said softly. I've been running from him for years, Caleb answered. Time I turned around and gave him something to chase. Clara sat in the corner, wrapped in Evelyn's old blanket. She had been listening the whole time, her eyes big and serious. I'm coming too, she said. No. Caleb knelt down in front of her. You stay here with Martha, where it's safe. He killed my pa. Clara's chin trembled, but her voice stayed strong. I want to see him answer for it. Caleb's heart ached at that. He took her small hands in his rough ones. You already did the bravest thing, Clara. You carried the truth all this way. You kept it safe when grown men couldn't. Now let me carry it the rest of the way. He gave her a gentle smile. That's my job. Protecting people. I forgot that for a while. You helped me remember. Clara looked at him a long moment. Then she nodded and threw her arms around his neck. The whole town moved with purpose that day. Word spread quiet from house to house. Ranchers checked their rifles. Wives packed food for the road. Men who had never stood up to anyone in their lives squared their shoulders and got ready to stand together. For the first time in a long while, Dry Creek was not afraid, but Silas Crow was one step ahead. That evening, Caleb decided to move Clara out to Bell Ranch. It sat off the main road, tucked behind a rise, the last place Silas would look for a frightened girl. Martha came along to keep her company. Caleb figured he would leave them there safe, ride out at dawn as the bait, and lead the wolves far away. He figured wrong. They had barely settled inside the old ranch house when Caleb heard it. Hoofbeats, many of them, coming fast. He looked out the window, and his blood went cold. Torches. A dozen riders, maybe more, thundering up the road with guns drawn. And at the front, tall in the saddle, sat Silas Crow. Down! Caleb barked. Get down and stay low. The first shots shattered the windows. Glass rained across the floor. Martha pulled Clara beneath the heavy oak table, shielding the girl with her own body. Caleb returned fire from the doorway, quick and steady, dropping 2 men from their saddles. But there were too many. They swarmed the house like locusts. The evidence! Clara cried. Caleb, the papers! He turned toward her voice. That 1 second cost him. A rifle cracked. Fire tore through Caleb's side, spinning him around. He crashed to the floor, the world going white with pain. He fought to rise, reaching for Clara, reaching with everything he had left. The door burst open. Rough hands grabbed the girl, tearing her from Martha's grasp. Another man snatched the evidence from Caleb's coat. Caleb! Clara screamed. He crawled toward her, blood soaking the boards beneath him, his fingers stretching out. But they were already dragging her into the dark. The world came back to Caleb in pieces. First the pain, a hot, ragged fire in his side that pulsed with every breath. Then the smell of blood and gun smoke. Then Martha's voice, far away and shaking, calling his name. Caleb. Caleb, stay with me now. He blinked. The ceiling of Bell Ranch swam above him. Somewhere close, hands pressed hard against his wound. Martha's hands. Her gray hair had come loose, and there was a smear of dirt across her cheek, but her eyes stayed steady. They took her, Caleb whispered. His voice cracked like dry wood. Martha. They took Clara. I know. Her jaw trembled. I know, son. Men filled the room now. He heard their boots on the broken glass. Hughes was there, old Pell's brother. Faces he knew, faces gone pale and grim. Someone lit a lamp. Someone else tore a shirt into strips. Riders went after them, Hughes said, kneeling close. But it's black as pitch out there, Caleb. They scattered every which way. We lost the trail. Lost the trail. The words landed like stones in Caleb's chest. They got him to a chair, propped him up, wrapped his side tight. The bleeding slowed, but something inside him did not slow. Something inside him was sinking, down and down, into a dark he knew too well. He had felt this before. The night Evelyn died, he had lain in the dirt just like this, bleeding, reaching, watching the person he loved slip away while his hands came up empty. He had promised himself he would never feel it again. So he had run. He had hidden on his ranch for years, telling himself that if he never protected anyone, he could never fail anyone. And now, here it was again. The same helplessness, the same cold truth. Everyone he tried to save got hurt. You should rest, Martha said gently. You lost a lot of blood. Caleb did not answer. He stared at the floor where Clara had been dragged away, at the dark stain of his own blood soaked into the old boards. The men drifted out to search the yard for tracks. The house went quiet. Caleb sat alone with the lamp and the pain and the awful weight of it all. Silas had been right. You always lose the people you try to protect. Caleb's eyes fell to the floor near the doorway. Something metal glinted there, half hidden under a fallen chair. He leaned down, ignoring the fire in his side, and picked it up. His old marshal badge. It must have fallen from his coat when the bullet spun him around. The tin star was scratched and dull now, worn soft at the edges. He had carried it all these years, but never worn it. Just carried it, like a man carries a scar. He turned it over in his rough fingers. He remembered the day they pinned it on him. He remembered how proud Evelyn had been, how she had kissed the cold metal and laughed. He remembered the weight of it on his chest, the way it made him feel like he stood for something bigger than himself. And he remembered the night he dropped it, the night he decided he was done. Maybe he was done. Maybe a broken man had no business chasing killers into the dark. He was shot. He was tired. He was the same man who had failed once already. And here he sat, having failed again. His hand began to lower toward his pocket, to put the badge away, to let the dark take him one more time. Then he heard her. Not really, not out loud, but he heard her voice all the same, clear as morning, the way she had said it in his barn that first cold night. Maybe you didn't lose everyone. His fingers stopped. He saw her face, the way she had thrown her arms around his neck, the way she had looked at him with those big, serious eyes, and called him brave when he felt like anything but. She was out there, alive, scared, waiting for someone to come. And this time, Caleb was not going to lie in the dirt and watch. He closed his fist around the badge. Slowly, teeth gritted, he pushed himself up from the chair. His side screamed, his legs shook, but he stood. He pinned the star to his chest. "Martha," he called out, his voice low and hard and sure. "Get me my horse." Morning came gray and cold over Dry Creek. Caleb rode in slow. Every step of the horse sent a fresh spike of pain through his side, but he sat tall in the saddle anyway. His shirt was stained dark, where the wound had bled through the wrappings. His face was pale as ash, but his eyes were clear. People stopped what they were doing when they saw him. The blacksmith set down his hammer. Two women outside the general store went still, baskets on their hips. Children peeked out from behind their mothers' skirts. Word spread fast, the way it always did in a small town. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered in the dusty street, and they all stared at the man they had once called a coward. Caleb pulled his horse to a stop in front of the church steps. It took everything he had to swing down from the saddle without falling. Martha was right behind him, ready to catch him, but he waved her off gently. He needed to stand on his own 2 feet for this. He looked out at the faces that had whispered about him for years, faces that had believed the rumors. "Most of you know me," Caleb said. His voice was rough, but it carried. "And most of you think you know my story. That I ran, that I quit, that I was too yellow to wear a badge." Nobody spoke. A dog barked somewhere down the street, then went quiet. "Maybe some of that's true," Caleb went on. "I did run, but not because I was scared of dying. I was scared of failing, scared of watching one more person I cared about get hurt while I stood there helpless." He swallowed hard. "So I hid. For years. I let this town believe whatever it wanted, because I believed worse things about myself." He pulled the badge from his chest and held it up so they could all see the dull tin star catching the weak morning light. "Last night they took a little girl," he said, 10 years old, Clara Bell, Thomas Bell's daughter. Some of you knew Thomas. You knew he never turned away a hungry family or a neighbor in need. They killed him for his land. And now they've got his little girl, because she carries the proof of what they did. A murmur ran through the crowd. Eyes turned. Someone in the back pressed a hand to her mouth. Caleb lowered the badge and looked down at it. "I put this on last night," he said, "because I thought I needed it. Thought a man had to have a star to stand for something." He shook his head slowly. "But I was wrong about that too. I don't need a badge to fight for what's right. Neither do you. A badge is just tin. What matters is what a person decides to do when someone weak needs someone strong." He raised his head. His voice grew stronger. "I'm going after her. Shot up and half dead, I'm going. But I can't do it alone. I couldn't do it alone even when I was whole." He met their eyes, one at a time. "So, I'm asking, not as a marshal, as your neighbor, help me bring that little girl home." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Martha stepped up beside him. "You all listen to me," she said, her schoolteacher voice ringing sharp and clear. "A good man who is hurting is still a good man. This one's been hurting a long time. Question is, are we going to let a child pay for our fear?" Hughes was the first to step forward. "I know that Bell land better than anyone," he said. "Hunted every ridge and gully out there since I was a boy." The blacksmith stepped up next. "I can put steel in every hand that needs it." Old Pell's brother came forward, and then a rancher, and then 2 more. One by one the crowd shifted, until the whole street seemed to lean toward Caleb like grass bending in the wind. They followed him into the church and gathered around a wide table. Hughes spread out a worn map, weighting the corners with tin cups. "Syndicate men use the old cattle road here," Hughes said, dragging a finger across the paper. "Only way to move fast in the dark. They'll hole up at the Bell place thinking nobody'll come. Then that's where we go," Caleb said. And together, heads bent low over the flickering lamplight, they began to build their plan. The plan changed the moment Hughes doubled back from scouting the Bell Road. "They're not at the ranch," he said, breathing hard, hat crushed in his fist. "Saw the tracks split off. They took her to the old Miller Mill by the creek bend. Been empty 10 years. Caleb nodded slow. A mill made sense. Thick walls. One road in. Easy to defend. Hard to reach. Silas always did think 3 steps ahead. They moved through the trees as the sun climbed higher. The men spread out the way Caleb had told them, keeping low, keeping quiet. The mill sat crooked against the gray sky, its big wheel long since stopped, half rotted and choked with weeds. 2 of Silas's men lounged near the door, rifles across their knees, not expecting a soul in the world to come. Caleb crouched behind a fallen log and pressed a hand to his side. The wound burned like a hot coal. He breathed through it. "You sure about this?" Hughes whispered. You can barely stand." "I don't need to stand," Caleb said. "I need to get inside quiet, that's all." He looked at the men behind him, their faces tight and pale, but set. "When you hear my whistle, you make all the noise you can out front. Draw them out. But nobody shoots, unless they shoot first. We're not here to kill anybody. We're here to bring a little girl home." Hughes gave a grim nod. Caleb slipped along the creek bank, while the guards watched the road. The water covered the sound of his boots. Around the back, he found what he was hoping for, a low broken window where the boards had rotted through. He eased himself through it inch by inch, teeth clenched against the fire in his ribs, and dropped soft onto the dusty floor inside. The mill was dim and thick with the smell of old grain and rot. Sunlight came through in dusty ribbons. He heard voices somewhere near the front, men laughing, a bottle clinking. And then, small and close, a sound that stopped his heart. Crying. Quiet crying, the kind a child makes when she's been holding it in a long time. He followed it to a storeroom in the back. Through a crack in the door, he saw her. Clara sat huddled against a sack of old flour, her wrists tied with rough rope, her cheeks streaked with dirt and tears. She was shaking. Caleb pushed the door open slow. Clara's head snapped up, eyes wide with fear. Then she saw his face. Her mouth fell open, and she nearly cried out, but he pressed a finger to his lips. "Shh," he breathed. "It's me. I've got you." He crossed the room in 3 quick steps and knelt beside her, drawing his knife. The rope fell away. She threw her arms around his neck so hard it knocked the wind out of him, and he held her, one hand cradling the back of her head. "I knew you'd come," she whispered into his shoulder. "I told him you would. I told Silas." "You're all right now," Caleb said. "I've got you. We're going home." But Clara pulled back, and there was something urgent in her tear-filled eyes, something she needed to say before another second passed. "Marshal Caleb," she whispered, "he talked about you. Silas did. He was laughing. He said he knew you a long time ago." Caleb went still. "What did he say, Clara?" Her lip trembled. "He said it was his fault. What happened to your wife?" The words tumbled out fast now, like she was afraid to hold them. "He said he told the robbers when to come, that he made it happen. He said you never even knew. He laughed about it, Caleb. He said you spent all these years blaming yourself, and it was him the whole time." The room seemed to tilt. Caleb felt the floor drop out from under everything he thought he knew. All those years, all those nights staring at Evelyn's empty chair, telling himself he was too slow, too weak, too late. It had never been his failure at all. It had been Silas. His hands trembled. His breath came shallow. And into that terrible silence, Clara's small voice reached him. "He wanted you to hate yourself," she whispered. "So don't." Caleb looked at Clara, really looked at her, this brave girl tied up in the dark, still finding words to save him. "So don't," she had said. He pressed his forehead to hers for one quick moment. "You're the strongest person I ever met, you know that?" Then he took her by the hand and led her to the broken window. He lifted her through it gentle as he could. "Run to the creek," he whispered. "Follow it down to the trees. Hughes is out there. He'll keep you safe. You don't stop for anything. You hear me?" She grabbed his sleeve. "Come with me." "I will. I promise. But I have to finish this first." He touched her cheek. "Go. Now." She went. He watched her small shape slip through the weeds and vanish toward the water. Only then did he let the breath go out of him. Then he turned back toward the front of the mill. He did not whistle. Not yet. He walked instead, slow and steady, one hand pressed to the fire in his side, out of the shadows and into the ribbons of dusty light. The 2 men near the door were still laughing at some joke. And there, leaning against an old grain post with a bottle in his hand, stood Silas Crow. Silas saw him. He did not flinch. He smiled, the way a man smiles at an old friend across a saloon. "Well," Silas said, "there he is, the great Marshal Whitmore. Look at you, bleeding all over the floor, crawling through windows for a little girl who isn't even yours." He shook his head slow. "You never did know when to quit." "It's over, Silas." "Is it?" Silas took a drink, easy as anything. "You look worse than the night your wife died." "Remember that night, Caleb?" "Course you do. You've thought about nothing else for years. All that guilt, all that shame." He laughed, low and cruel. "You wore it like a coat, and you never once wondered who really opened the door." Caleb's hand hovered near his gun. His whole body shook. "I know now." Something flickered behind Silas's eyes, just for a second. Then the smile came back, wider, meaner. "So the girl talked. Fine. Then you know the truth. I told those boys when to hit the bank. I knew Evelyn would be there. I knew you'd freeze." He spread his arms wide, the bottle swinging. "And you did. You froze and she died. And I walked away clean while you fell apart. Best work I ever did." He tilted his head. "Go on then. You've got a gun. I can see how bad you want to use it. Do it. Put me down. It's what you came for." Caleb drew. The gun came up smooth and sure, the way it always had, and the barrel found Silas's chest and held there. His fingers settled on the trigger. Silas did not move. His eyes gleamed. He wanted it. He was daring it. And every year of grief, every empty morning, every night staring at that chair rose up in Caleb like a flood. His hand was steady now. One squeeze. That was all. One squeeze, and the man who took Evelyn would be gone from the world. But he heard her voice. Not Evelyn's, Clara's. "He wanted you to hate yourself, so don't." And behind it, softer, Evelyn's own belief in him, the thing she'd loved in him most. Not the gun, not the badge, the heart that chose mercy when mercy was hardest. Caleb breathed out slow. "No," he said. He lowered the gun. Silas blinked, thrown for the first time. "What?" "You want me to be you," Caleb said quietly. "You've wanted it all along. You want me to pull that trigger so I'll finally know what it feels like to be a murderer." He shook his head. "I won't give you that. You're going to hang for this, Silas, in front of the whole town, by law, by justice, not by me." For one flicker of a moment, Silas looked almost afraid. Then his hand dropped to the bottle, and he hurled it hard at Caleb's head. Caleb jerked aside. The bottle shattered against the post, and Silas was already moving, quick and low, shouldering past his startled men and bolting through the mill door into the daylight. "He's running!" one of the guards shouted. Caleb put 2 fingers to his lips and blew the whistle sharp and long. The whistle split the air like a crack of lightning. Out in the trees, Deputy Hughes rose from cover with 3 of the men from Dry Creek at his back. They had come at midnight, quiet as shadows, following Caleb's plan to the letter. Now they moved. Silas burst from the mill and ran straight into the open. And there was Hughes, rifle up, calm as a Sunday morning. "Far as you go, Crow," Hughes said. Silas skidded in the dust. He looked left. He looked right. Ranch hands and farmers stepped out from behind the wagons and the water trough, from behind the old fence posts, until there was no gap left to run through. Men he had threatened. Men he had robbed. Men who had stayed silent for years because they were afraid. They were not silent now. They stood in a ring around him, and not one of them looked away. Silas laughed, but it came out thin. "You think this holds? You think a courtroom scares me? I own half the judges in this territory." "Then we'll find one you don't own," Caleb said. He came out of the mill slow, one hand still pressed to his side, blood dark between his fingers. But he stood tall. "And if you burned the papers, it won't matter. You just confessed to 5 men. And God. That's enough to start." Clara came running up from the creek then, wet to the knees, her hair full of leaves. She stopped when she saw her father's killer surrounded, guns pointed at him instead of at her. Her chest heaved. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out the letter. Whole now, both pieces. The torn page they had found hidden at Bell Ranch fit right against the first, and there at the bottom, plain as day, was the signature. Silas Crow. He didn't burn it, Clara said, her voice shaking but clear, because I had it the whole time. Silas lunged for her. He got half a step before Hughes's rifle butt caught him across the shoulders and put him in the dirt. 2 ranch hands were on him in a blink, twisting his arms behind his back, binding his wrists with rope from a saddlebag. He thrashed and cursed, and then he went still, breathing hard, cheek pressed to the ground he had tried so hard to steal. They rode back to Dry Creek as the sun climbed high. By the time they reached the main street, word had already spread. People stood on porches and in doorways. The same people who had once whispered that Caleb Whitmore was a coward now watched him ride in bloodied and unbowed, with a little girl beside him and Silas Crow bound behind a saddle. Nobody whispered now. Martha Ellis was waiting outside the courthouse steps, her gray hair pinned back, her chin high. When she saw Caleb, she pressed a hand to her mouth and her eyes filled, but she did not cry. She had known. She had believed in him when no one else would. "You came back," she said. "I came back," Caleb answered. They brought Silas up the courthouse steps and sat him on a bench while the county marshal was sent for. And then something happened that no one had planned. An old rancher named Del Foster stepped forward out of the crowd. He turned his hat in his hands, nervous, then squared his shoulders. "He threatened my boy," Foster said, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "2 winters back. Said he'd burn my barn if I didn't sign my south field over. I signed. I was scared." His voice cracked. "I ain't scared no more." A woman came next. Then a young ranch hand who'd seen the syndicate move stolen cattle by night. Then another man, and another. One by one they climbed the courthouse steps and told what they had carried in silence. The threats, the fires, the papers they'd signed with a gun at their backs. Each voice gave the next one courage. Silas watched them come, and with every word his face grew paler. Caleb stood at the bottom of the steps, with Clara's hand in his, and he watched the whole town of Dry Creek rise up together, at last, unafraid. The county hearing was held 3 days later. They filled the courthouse until there was no room left to stand. Folks who could not squeeze inside pressed close to the open windows, hats in their hands, straining to hear. Caleb sat near the front with Clara at his side. His wound was stitched and wrapped now, still stiff, but he sat straight as a fence post. Clara wore a clean blue dress Martha had found for her. Her hands were folded in her lap, but her eyes never left the front of the room. The county marshal had come, and a judge from 2 counties over. A judge Silas did not own. Silas Crow was brought in wearing chains. He had cleaned himself up somehow. Someone had fetched him a fine gray coat, and his hair was combed back, and when he sat down, he looked less like a bound outlaw, and more like a wealthy man who had wandered in by mistake. He smiled at the judge. He nodded to men in the crowd as though they were old friends. "Your Honor," Silas said, smooth as riverstone, "this is a sad misunderstanding. These good people are frightened and grieving. They have found a man to blame. I am a businessman. I built half this territory with my own 2 hands." The judge said nothing. He only nodded toward Caleb. One by one, the people of Dry Creek stood. Del Foster went first. He told about his south field and the threat against his boy. His voice did not crack this time. Then came the woman whose husband had been beaten. Then the young ranch hand who had counted stolen cattle moving in the dark. Then a widow who had signed her land away with a rifle pointed at her door. Each of them spoke plain and true. Each of them looked straight at Silas when they did. Silas's smile began to slip. "Hearsay," he said. "Fear talking. Not one of them has a shred of proof." "Then let's talk about proof," Caleb said. He rose slow, one hand at his side, and walked to the front. He laid out the stolen land records the ranch hands had recovered. He laid out Martha's letters, the ones Thomas Bell had written warning his neighbors before he died. He spoke calm and steady, the way a marshal speaks when the truth is on his side, and he knows it. "Thomas Bell would not sell," Caleb said. "So they killed him. His daughter watched it happen. She has been running ever since, carrying the one thing they wanted most." The room went dead quiet. Silas leaned forward. "The girl is a child. A grieving child. Whatever she thinks she saw, whatever scrap of paper she's clutching, it means nothing. It is torn. It is worthless." His voice rose. "You cannot hang a man on the words of an orphan and a coward who threw away his own badge." Caleb turned. He looked at Clara. Clara stood. She walked to the front of the room, small and steady, and she set the letter on the table before the judge. Both pieces, the torn page pressed against the first, matched edge to edge, whole again. She smoothed it flat with her small hand. "My father wrote this," she said, "the night before they killed him. He wrote down what they did. He wrote down who paid, and how much, and why. And he signed it." She looked up at the judge. "And at the bottom, so did the man who ordered it done." The judge lifted the letter. He read it slow. His face turned hard as stone. Then he read the last line aloud, and the name written there, plain and dark in Silas Crow's own hand, above his own signature. Silas Crow. The room erupted. Silas came out of his chair, chains and all, shouting that the letter was forged, that the girl was lying, that he would see them all ruined. But the county marshal already had a hand on his shoulder, forcing him back down. Two more men stepped in. This time, no smile came. This time, no charm. He looked out at the ring of faces closing around him, the same faces that had once looked away, and he found no mercy in a single one. "Silas Crow," the judge said, "you are bound over for the murder of Thomas Bell, and you will answer for it." They led him out in chains through the crowd. Nobody moved to help him. Nobody said a word for him. The syndicate that had ruled Dry Creek with fire and fear crumbled in that single afternoon, and every stolen field, every burned barn, every silent winter came pouring into the light. Caleb stood at the front of the room with Clara's hand in his, and he watched justice, at long last, come home. Spring came soft to Dry Creek that year. Caleb's ranch had changed. A man who had not seen it in a long while might have walked right past, thinking he had taken a wrong turn. The barn stood tall and freshly painted, its boards no longer sagging, its roof no longer letting in the rain. The fields that had once grown, nothing but weeds, now rolled green and gold in the morning light. Fences ran straight and true along the property line, mended board by board through the long winter months. But it was not the barn or the fields that made the place different. It was the sound. Laughter. On Saturdays, the children came. They rode in on the backs of their fathers' wagons, spilling out into the yard before the horses had even stopped, running toward the corral where Caleb waited. He taught them to ride. He taught them slow and patient, one hand steadying a small boot in the stirrup, the other resting on a pony's neck. "Sit up straight now," he would say. "Let the horse know you trust him. He'll trust you right back." Del Foster's boy was there most weekends, tall now and quick with a rope. So was the widow's daughter, and half a dozen others whose folks had once been too frightened to look Caleb in the eye. Now they waved from their wagons. Now they left baskets of bread and jars of preserves on his porch. Now they called him neighbor. Martha Ellis came by on Sundays. She would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and watch the children ride. And sometimes she would look over at Caleb and just shake her head, a small smile tugging at her mouth. "You've done a fine thing here," she told him one evening, the sun going gold behind the hills. Caleb leaned against the porch rail. "Wasn't just me." "No," Martha agreed, "but you stood up first. The rest of us only followed." He did not answer that. He never knew quite what to say when folks thanked him. But he had stopped flinching from their kindness. That was something. The empty chair inside the house was not empty anymore. Sometimes a child sat in it, tired out from a day of riding. Sometimes Martha. And Caleb found that the sight of it no longer cut him the way it once had. Evelyn's picture still stood on the shelf. Beside it now lay his old marshal badge, the metal worn smooth, not hidden away in a drawer anymore. Set out in the open, where the light could catch it. Not a reminder of what he had lost. A reminder that he had loved, that he still could. It was on one of those warm spring evenings that Clara came. She lived with her aunt and uncle now, a good family on a spread 2 hours' ride to the east. But she came often, and Caleb always knew her the moment she crested the hill, sitting easy in the saddle on the little brown mare he had given her. She rode into the yard and slid down and ran to him, and he caught her in a hug that made his stitched shoulder ache. He did not mind the ache one bit. "You're taller," he said, holding her back at arm's length. "Aunt Ruth says I've grown a whole inch." Clara grinned. Then her grin softened into something quieter. She looked up at him with those clear, steady eyes that had never once lied to him. "Caleb," she said, "I wanted to say thank you for saving me. That night in the barn, and every day after." Caleb knelt down slow, so they were eye to eye. The wind moved through the tall grass behind them, and somewhere a horse nickered soft. "Clara," he said, and his voice came rough. "You've got that backwards." She tilted her head. "Before you came, I was just waiting to be done. Sitting in an empty house, letting the years go by." He swallowed hard. "You knocked on my door in the middle of a storm, and you gave me a reason to get back up, to care about something again." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You saved me too, little one. You saved me right back." The next morning came quiet and pale, the sky a soft gray that promised sun by noon. Caleb rose before the birds. He did not know why, exactly, only that something in his chest told him where he needed to go. He walked out past the barn, past the corral where the ponies stood sleepy in the early cool, and up the low rise behind the house. There, beneath a lone oak tree that had stood longer than any man could remember, lay Evelyn. He had chosen this spot years ago. Back then, he had come every day, sat in the dirt, and let the grief pull him under like a river. He had not been able to bear the sight of the world going on without her. He had come here to feel close to the dead, because he no longer felt close to the living. But he had not come in a long while now. Caleb knelt beside the simple stone. Wildflowers had grown up around it, purple and yellow, nodding gentle in the breeze. He brushed a bit of leaf off the top of the marker with his rough hand. In his other hand, he held his old marshal badge. "Morning, Evie," he said. The name felt easy on his tongue. Once it had hurt to say it. Now it was like greeting an old friend. "Been a while, I know." The wind moved through the oak leaves above him, a soft whispering sound. "Wanted to tell you some things." He turned the badge over in his fingers, feeling the worn edges, the small scratches earned across long years. "That little girl I told you about. Clara. She came by yesterday. She's grown near a whole inch. Rides that mare like she was born in the saddle." He gave a low chuckle. "You'd love her, Evie. Lord, you'd love her something fierce." He looked out over the ranch below. The fields rolled green all the way to the road. Smoke curled from the chimney of a neighbor's house far off. It was a good land, a living land. "You know what she told me?" Caleb went on. "She said thank you. For saving her. He shook his head slow. But she's got it wrong. She saved me. I was gone, Evie. I was gone same as you. Only my heart just hadn't stopped beating yet. I blamed myself for that night. For not being fast enough. For living when you didn't. His throat went tight. He waited for it to pass. I carried that a long time. Thought if I ever tried to protect anybody again, I'd just lose them too. So I quit. Quit everything. Quit being a man at all, near enough. He set his hand flat against the warm stone. But then a child knocked on my door in the middle of a storm. And I couldn't turn her away. I tried to tell myself I could, but I couldn't. He smiled, and his eyes stung. I think you had something to do with that. I think maybe you sent her. Sent her to knock some sense back into this old fool. The birds had begun to wake now, calling to one another across the fields. The gray sky was warming, gold light creeping in at the edges. Silas is behind bars. The truth came out. Thomas Bell got his justice, and his girls got a home. Caleb drew a long breath. And I let it go. The anger, the revenge. I could have killed Silas that day. Part of me wanted to, but I didn't. Because you taught me a better way, Evie. You always did. He stayed there a good while, saying nothing more, just being near her the way he used to. But it was different now. It did not hollow him out. It filled him up. At last he rose, his knees stiff, and looked down at the badge one more time. I'll keep this where I can see it now, he said. Not to remember what I lost. To remember what I loved, and what I still can. He walked back down the hill as the sun broke full over the land. Inside the house, he crossed to the shelf where Evelyn's picture stood. Her face smiled out at him, forever young, forever kind. Caleb set the badge down gently beside it. Not a symbol of failure. A reminder that love and courage and purpose could survive even the deepest loss. The sun hung low and golden over the ranch, painting the fields in warm honey light. Caleb sat easy in his saddle, his old bay gelding walking slow and steady beneath him. Beside him rode Clara on her little mare, her hair catching the last light of the day like spun copper. Sit up straight now, Caleb said. Heels down. There you go. You've got it. Clara grinned, wide and proud. I told you I could do it, Marshal Caleb. So you did. He shook his head, smiling. I'm not a marshal anymore, you know. I know. She looked at him sideways, her eyes sparkling. You don't need a badge to protect people. The words landed soft in his chest, the way her words always seemed to. He looked away toward the ranch, spread out below them, and let the feeling settle in. Down by the house, the whole of Dry Creek had gathered. Wagons stood in a rough circle near the barn, the same barn that had been half falling down not so long ago. Now, its walls stood straight and true, the fresh boards pale and clean against the older wood. Folks had come from all over to help raise it back up. And now they had come again, this time to celebrate. Long tables sat out in the yard, covered in cloths that fluttered in the evening breeze. There were pies and roasted chickens and jugs of cool lemonade. Children ran between the legs of the grown-ups, laughing and shrieking. Somebody had brought a fiddle, and the sound of it drifted up the rise, sweet and lively. Martha Ellis stood near the tables, her gray hair pinned neat, waving a hand up at them. You two coming down, or you planning to ride off into the sunset? She called. Clara laughed and nudged her mare into a trot. Caleb followed, his heart lighter than it had been in years. When they reached the yard, hands reached out to greet him. Men who had once whispered behind his back now clapped him on the shoulder. Women who had once crossed the street to avoid him now smiled and pressed plates of food into his hands. The old ranch hand from the Bell place shook his hand hard. Good to see this place full again, Caleb, the man said. Real good. It's good to have it full, Caleb answered. And he meant it. Martha came to his side, her sharp eyes soft with something like pride. "You did a fine thing, you know," she said quietly. "Not just for that child. For all of us. This town had forgotten how to stand together. You reminded it." "Wasn't just me," Caleb said. "It was everybody." "That's exactly why it worked." She patted his arm. "A good man who was hurting is still a good man. I always said so." Caleb looked down at her. "You did, even when I didn't believe it." "Especially then." She smiled and moved off toward the tables, calling to the children to come get their supper. The evening rolled on. The fiddle played, and folks danced in the yard, kicking up little clouds of dust that glowed gold in the sinking light. Clara ran with the other children, her laughter ringing out clear and free, the sound of a child who was no longer afraid. Caleb stepped back from the crowd for a moment. He walked a little ways off to where he could see it all. The barn, the tables, the dancing, the lights beginning to twinkle as the dusk came on. He remembered how this place had looked not so long ago, empty, silent. The corral falling apart, the fields untended, the house dark and cold. He had been like that too, a man hollowed out, going through his days, but not truly living them. Now the ranch was full of noise, and light, and life. And so was he. He watched Clara spin in a circle, her arms out wide, her face turned up to the last of the sun. She caught sight of him and waved, that same bright wave from across the yard. Caleb lifted his hand and waved back. He was no longer the broken man who had run from his pain. He had found his way home. He was a protector again, a neighbor, a friend. Maybe even something like a father. His heart had been wounded. Deeply. But it had not been destroyed. And standing there in the golden light, watching a little girl dance and a whole town come alive around him, Caleb Whitmore understood at last that even the most broken heart could find its way back to redemption, to family, and to hope. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.